2 weeks after I walked out of Sterling and Company. Grant Mercer saw the industry announcement light up his phone. I was not there to watch it happen, but people in that office talk fast when they panic. They said his face went the color of blank paper the moment he saw my name beside William Hawthorne's. They said he blinked, cursed, and then started calling every assistant he could find as if someone might undo it for him. While he tore through his contacts list, I was in a quiet conference room on the east side of downtown Cleveland, sliding my signature across a contract he had chased for more than a decade. The irony settled over me like warm breath on glass. I could finally see my own path clearly, and it no longer had anything to do with him. But that was 2 weeks later, 2 weeks earlier. I was still the woman everyone believed would never leave. I walked into Grant's office with the same calm stride I had used for 27 years. He barely glanced up from his chair. I set my resignation letter on his desk. The moment his eyes landed on my name at the bottom, he barked a laugh loud enough for the hallway to hear. "Where do you think you're going?" "Old girl," he said. "You're nothing without this company." The words cut, but the pain faded fast. I had already spent months stitching myself back together in quiet places he never bothered to look. I kept my voice steady. "You're right," I told him. "Thank you for everything." He leaned back, amused, convinced he had just swatted away a minor inconvenience. He did not ask why I was leaving. He did not imagine I could be walking toward something bigger than his approval. To him, I was background noise useful when needed, invisible the rest of the time. I left his office without another word. The corridor felt strange, as if it no longer belonged to me, but I did not slow down. I had 2 weeks of silence to keep and a truth waiting on the other side of it. That truth would begin unfolding in the years I never spent under his ceiling again. I was 24 when I first walked through the doors of Sterling and Company. Back then, the building felt enormous, and I felt small but determined. I started as an operations assistant, the kind of role where you do everything no one else wants to do and thank them for the opportunity. My first supervisor, Dana Pierce, warned me gently on my first week. "If you're good at cleaning up messes around here, Nora, they'll make sure you never stop cleaning them." I laughed back then, too naive to understand she was giving me the truest advice I would ever receive. Years blurred into each other. I learned how to stabilize a broken supply chain in one afternoon, how to calm a vendor threatening to walk, how to rebuild production timelines after a storm shut down an entire distribution route. Whenever something caught fire, someone would call out, "Get Nora," and I always came running. I trained analysts, coordinators, and junior managers, bright, eager people who admired me until the day the promotion wheel spun and lifted them above me. One of them, a 31-year-old named Tyler Briggs, stopped by my desk after being promoted to a role I had built from scratch. He said, "I hope you don't think this is awkward." I kept my voice even. "Congratulations. Tyler, you earned what the company believes you earned." He shifted, unsure whether I had praised him or exposed the truth. He walked away before deciding. That was the year I began hearing the words steady, supportive, and reliable in my reviews. They came wrapped in polite smiles, but they meant something far colder. "You will stay exactly where we put you." Grant slid into leadership not long after that. During his first team meeting, he called me old girl for the first time. The room went silent. Then he smiled as if daring anyone to challenge him. No one did. I kept doing the work that held the department together, but each year the feeling grew heavier. I showed up early, stayed late, and watched my name disappear from conversations where credit was handed out. By the time I turned 49, invisibility had become the air I breathed, and Sterling and Company expected me to keep breathing it forever. The Huron Optimization Initiative landed on my desk with no warning, just a thin folder and Grant's voice floating over my cubicle wall. "Nora will handle it. She always does." I opened the folder that afternoon and realized it was not a project. It was a collapsing bridge. Forecasting models were months out of date. Supplier contracts conflicted with each other, and production targets were impossible without a full overhaul. It should have gone to a director. Instead, it came to me. For 6 weeks, I built the entire framework from the ground up. I negotiated with suppliers who had stopped taking Sterling and Company seriously. I restructured schedules, rebuilt projections, and stabilized the production runway through the end of the fiscal year. Every night I left the office long after dark, carrying the entire initiative on my back. When the quarterly review arrived, I sat in the second row with my binder on my lap. Grant walked in holding the presentation I had written. He did not meet my eyes. "Today, I'll walk you through our updated optimization strategy," he began. Slide by slide, he presented my work, the new supplier matrix, the revised forecast curves, the risk mitigation ladder. He spoke smoothly, confidently, as if the ideas had come to him during a casual morning shower. About halfway through, he offered a single line. Of course, I had some support from my team. A junior analyst next to me leaned over and whispered, "Wow, I guess Nora must not have contributed much." My hands tightened around the binder. Something small and sharp snapped inside me, quiet enough that no one else heard it, strong enough that I felt it across my ribs. That night, at home in Lakewood, my son Daniel noticed the way I sank into the kitchen chair. He closed the fridge door and looked at me carefully. "Mom, why do you let them talk to you like that?" I tried to answer, but exhaustion pressed against my throat, heavy and unforgiving. Later, alone in my room, I reread years of performance reviews. Not a single mention of leadership, not a single path forward, just stability, compliance, and a future shaped like a dead end. I almost turned down the invitation to the Cleveland Chamber of Commerce Gala. It was a last-minute request from my colleague Marion, who begged me to fill an empty seat at her table. "Please, Nora," she said, clutching her phone. "They already printed the name cards. I cannot explain an empty chair to our sponsor." I agreed, only because saying no felt harder than showing up. By the time I arrived, most of the tables were full, and Marion waved me over with relief. I slipped into the only open seat right beside a man whose name tag read William Hawthorne. I knew the name immediately. Everyone in Midwest manufacturing did. He was the retired chief executive officer who had rebuilt 3 failing divisions and pushed Hawthorne Industrial Systems into national relevance. My instinct was to give him space. People like him did not usually seek conversation with people like me. But he spoke first. "You're with Sterling and Company." "Yes," I said, "operations." He did not nod politely or offer a compliment. Instead, he asked, "Why does Sterling and Company still use a forecasting model from 2008? I blinked. "Because no one has pushed for a replacement," I said before I could stop myself. "The model drags production into constant reactive mode. I have recommended adjustments for years, but the leadership team is more comfortable patching old problems than rebuilding them." His eyebrows lifted just slightly. "So you already know the flaw. I know exactly where it fractures." I replied. From that moment, he stopped paying attention to the stage and focused entirely on me. Every question he asked dug deeper than the last supplier dependencies. Labor bottlenecks, systemic waste. I answered each one carefully, not trying to impress him, just telling the truth I lived with every day. During a lull between speakers, he rested his hands together and studied me. "You see systems, not symptoms. That's rare." I felt the words land somewhere I had forgotten existed. He lowered his voice. "Would you join me for dinner tomorrow evening? The Marble Room. I would like to continue this conversation." I hesitated. Grant's voice echoed in the back of my mind. That familiar laugh, that word he wielded like a leash. Old girl. But William waited, patient, unaffected by whatever fear crossed my face. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll be there." The first dinner at the Marble Room began without pleasantries. William opened a leather folder and pushed a case study toward me. "An auto parts plant in Toledo," he said. Everyone thinks the labor force is the issue. What do you see? I scanned the notes. The problem isn't labor, it's the sequencing of the machining line. They're forcing a 19-minute process into a 12-minute window. No workforce can compensate for a broken clock. A slow nod. Interesting. The second dinner was less graceful. He described a scenario involving layoffs and restructuring. I hesitated, circling around the hard decisions. He watched me closely. You avoid conflict, he said. I avoid harming people. I answered. There is a difference. One is strategic. One is fear. The third dinner rattled me before I even sat down. A board member from Sterling and Company, Ruth Halden, was seated across the room. I froze. William noticed immediately. Someone you know? Yes. Someone who would twist this into something it is not. He didn't look over. Ignore her. Sit. But my pulse didn't settle until Ruth left. The fourth dinner shifted the tone. William set aside the case studies and leaned back. I once lost an entire division because I trusted the wrong partner. Brilliant mind. Weak spine. When pressure mounted, he folded. He lifted his glass slightly. I do not intend to repeat that mistake. I wasn't sure why he was telling me this, but something tightened in my chest. The fifth dinner created its own storm. As I left the restaurant, a co-worker from Sterling and Company, Mark Hill, stepped onto the sidewalk. His eyebrows shot up. Wow, Nora. Did not know you were dating someone wealthy. His smirk followed me all the way to my car. By morning, the rumor had reached half the office. By the sixth dinner, I was tired of guessing. I set my menu down. What are we doing? William. He studied me for a long moment. These dinners are not social. I have been evaluating you. For what? For something that requires precision, courage, and vision. Something you may be ready for. For the first time in years, recognition felt like oxygen. Dinner 7 began differently. William did not bring a case file or a hypothetical. He waited until our plates were cleared, then placed a thick navy folder between us. It is time you know what this is really about, he said. I am launching Hawthorne Strategic Group, a consulting and operational innovation firm focused on rescuing manufacturers across the Midwest. The board approved initial funding last quarter. I felt my breath catch. And you want me to consult? No, he said. I want you to build it with me. He tapped the folder. I need a senior systems partner, not an assistant, not a manager, a co-architect, someone who understands operations the way engineers understand blueprints. When I opened the folder, numbers blurred for a moment before coming into focus a salary higher than anything I had ever imagined, a percentage of equity, full decision-making authority. My hands trembled. William, I have spent 27 years being told I am support staff, and they were wrong, he said simply. Take the lid off your own potential. I swallowed hard. There is a non-compete clause in my contract. I know, he replied. I reviewed it. It is weak and easily challenged. Sterling and Company cannot stop you from doing work they never allowed you to do. Hearing him say it out loud felt like being given permission to breathe after years underwater. Still, fear crawled up my spine. If I leave, there is no safety net. There is also no ceiling, he said. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table in Lakewood, the folder open in front of me. My son Daniel came home from his shift and watched me for a long moment. Mom, he said quietly, if you do not bet on yourself now, when will you? His voice was steady, certain in a way mine had not been for years. I closed the folder and finally let myself imagine a different life. The next morning, I called William and said yes. I walked into Grant Mercer's office the following Monday with the calmest heartbeat I had felt in months. He did not even look up when I stepped inside. He was scrolling through his emails, half smiling at whatever complaint or crisis someone else had sent him. I set my resignation letter on his desk. I am giving my 2 weeks, I said. His head jerked up, And then he let out a loud, theatrical laugh that echoed off the glass walls. "Where do you think you're going, old girl? You're nothing without this company." His voice carried into the hallway. I saw 2 analysts glance in, then quickly pretend not to. I kept my shoulders straight. "You're right," I said softly. "Thank you for everything." For a moment. He blinked, confused by my composure. Then he leaned back in his chair, smirking like the matter was settled. "Good luck out there. You will need it." I turned and left before he could see the expression I no longer bothered to hide. I was finished letting him define any part of my worth. That evening, a final email arrived from him. "When you realize no one wants a washed-up operations lifer, do not come crawling back." I saved it in a folder titled Evidence. The next days passed in a quiet haze. I trained my replacement, a thoughtful woman named Claire who kept whispering, "I do not know how you handled all this alone." I organized every file, built transition guides, and ignored the whispers about my supposed dinners with some wealthy man. Rumors had always been Sterling and Company's favorite language. 2 weeks later, I shut down my computer for the last time. No send-off, no speech, no handshake. I walked out of the building with a single box in my arms and the clarity of someone who no longer needed permission to breathe. My future was already waiting downtown. 2 weeks after my last day at Sterling and Company, I was standing in the open layout warehouse office of Hawthorne Strategic Group, reviewing the final draft of an operations blueprint. My notes were spread across the table when William stepped beside me. "It is time," he said. I closed the folder. "You are sure?" He nodded. "The industry needs to know who is leading this." A moment later, notifications chimed across every device in the room. Industry Midwest had published the feature. William turned his laptop so I could see. My breath caught. It was a full-page spread my name in clean, sharp letters beside his. Beneath the headline, the subheading read, "Hawthorne Strategic Group Names. Senior Systems Partner, former Sterling and Company Strategist to lead Regional Operational Transformation." Then there was the photograph. One of our dinners, me leaning forward, explaining a bottleneck model. William listening with that sharp intensity he never wasted on unimportant conversations. "It is a strong introduction," he said. "It feels unreal." I admitted, miles away, inside Sterling and Company. The fallout began immediately. I learned later from Marion that Grant Mercer had been in a budget meeting when the feature hit his phone. His face drained the moment he saw the headline, but it was the photo that hollowed him out completely. He recognized the restaurant instantly, the same place I always slipped out to, saying I needed an early night. He had assumed I was meeting a date, maybe a friend, maybe no one. He never imagined I was meeting a man who now controlled several contracts Sterling and Company had been chasing for years. Within minutes, my phone rang. Grant's name. I let it buzz until it stopped. A second call came, then a third. William glanced over. "Problem no," I said. "Not anymore." I turned my phone face down and went back to the blueprint. Within a month of the announcement, the tremors started hitting Sterling and Company. I heard the first one from Marion, who called during her lunch break. "We lost Hartwell Automotive," she whispered. "They shifted their operations to one of your partner firms. Grant is losing his mind." 2 weeks later, she called again. "And now Barton Machine. Same reason. They want the system your new group is using." I did not celebrate. I simply listened as the company that had dismissed me unraveled under the weight of its own stubbornness. An internal audit soon followed, triggered by the board, not by Grant. The findings spread through the building faster than gossip ever had. Marion told me everything in pieces. "They found your original Huron Initiative proposal," she said. The one Grant claimed was his. They found his comments, too. He wrote that your ideas were too ambitious and unnecessary. Another day, there was a whole folder where he buried your system improvements. The auditors said those changes would have saved the company nearly $200,000 last quarter. Later, HR found documented remarks, age-related comments he made about you. Meetings where he called you past your prime and technically outdated. It is all written down. Nora, human resources could not cover it. The board could not ignore it. The evidence spoke louder than any defense Grant could invent. One morning, Marion's text arrived without punctuation. He is out. They forced him to resign in front of the executive team. I let the words sink in, not with triumph, but with a quiet, steady acceptance. Choices had simply caught up to him. Throughout that week, messages flooded in from former colleagues. Some apologized, some admitted they had known, but fear kept them silent. I responded only to the ones who had shown kindness when it mattered. That evening, a voicemail from Grant appeared on my phone. I did not play it. I tapped the delete icon and set the phone down. His voice had shaped enough of my life already. Months passed, and the rhythm of my days shifted into something I had never known before. I walked into Hawthorne's strategic group each morning with a sense of purpose instead of dread. Our team had grown from 6 consultants to a dozen seasoned experts who treated me not as background support, but as a voice worth listening to. The 10th long-term partnership was signed on a quiet Thursday afternoon. William brought the contract to my office, tapping the folder once against the doorframe. 10, he said, a solid milestone. I signed beside his signature, the ink settling smoothly across the page. We built this, I told him. You built more of it than you realize, he replied. When he left the room, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the printed email I had kept folded for months. The words were still sharp. You are nothing without this company. I pinned it to the corkboard behind my chair. Not as a scar, not as a source of bitterness, just a marker of the woman I had been and the woman I had decided not to remain. From my window, Lake Erie stretched out under the pale afternoon light. Claire from onboarding stepped in with a question about a client proposal. She paused when she saw the email on the board. You keep that there for motivation, she asked. For clarity, I said. It reminds me why I am here, and why I will never shrink myself again. Our clients trusted me. My team relied on me. My decisions carried real weight. Not because someone allowed them to, but because I had earned that ground step by steady step. Meanwhile, Grant Mercer became a quiet footnote in industry gossip, an example passed around the conference tables of what happens when ego outruns competence. No one mentioned him with fear anymore, only pity. That evening, as our team prepared for a new client briefing, I stepped into the hallway and spoke directly to the camera crew recording our company's success story. If you are watching this and you have ever been told your best years are behind you, I said, I hope you keep walking anyway. The right moment waits for people who refuse to disappear. I turned back to my office and closed the door gently behind me. A new chapter of my life was still unfolding, and this time, every line of it belonged to me.